What is up, YouTube? This is Dave Croft. I do hope that you are having a great day today. Now, here's what we're going to be doing in this quick tip for working composers: creating a mastering chain just using 2 plugins. All right, to be fair, 2.5 plugins, but the half plugin's just a meter. But mastering seems like some sort of dark mystical art that you have to be wearing the Eye of Agamotto or whatever in order to get it right, or you have to be blessed with golden ears or thousands of dollars of equipment or a perfectly treated room in order to really do it correctly. And I'm here to tell you that you don't necessarily have to have all those things. So we're going to talk a little bit about the mastering process, and we're going to get a good, solid, mastered level track using just 2 plugins. So stick around for that for today's quick tip for working composers. So before we get started, let's kind of understand what mastering is and what it's looking to accomplish. Now, once upon a time, mastering was making sure that all the songs on a record sounded kind of the same as far as the sonic thumbprint. It needed to sound like they were all recorded at the same time, you know, in the same studio and all of that. And so everything kind of was on a record, and it had to be a certain volume and a certain loudness. Nowadays, with tracks being distributed single file all over the internet, whether it's through YouTube or SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or whatever, the idea of mastering has kind of shifted away from the album mindset and more to a loudness and making sure that your track sounds on par with other tracks that we're hearing on the service. Now, I gotta say, on the front end, mastering is a deep topic, and I'm only scratching the surface, but I want to kind of demystify it a little bit for you because it's really not that complicated. There's a lot of other things that could go into it, but we're just looking at, we're kind of wading into the shallow end of this so that you can at least get your hands dirty just doing some quick and easy mastering. So the mastering chain lives on your output bus. Whoops. The mastering chain lives on your output bus. With Logic, it's called the output. It does not necessarily live on the master. Like in Logic, if I open up the master window here, there's a master bus that it doesn't live here, because you can't add plugins here, right? So we're not putting it here. We're going to put our mastering chain on the output bus. And the way that the signal flow works is tracks go into a bus, and or sometimes they don't go, like if you have a reverb or if you don't have anything pointed to a reverb, then all these tracks kind of come down into this output bus, and they're going to hit each of these plugins before going to final fade. And what we want to do for mastering is put plugins or devices that once upon a time, these were physical devices. We're going to put plugins in that chain to affect the sound, to make it sound good and ultimately get us to the loudness level that we're going for. Mastering chain usually encompasses things like EQs and dynamic multiband compressors, stereo imaging, and frequency exciters, and there's a lot that goes into it. But I just want to talk about the 2 plugins that I think are the most essential and really do, in my opinion, 90% of the mastering work. So the first thing we're going to do is I've got us looped here into the loudest sustained portion of this cue that I've written. It's called Boom Goes the Dynamite, written for the NCAA tournament. And I am going to add, first, I'm going to add an EQ. This is going to help me shape the sound. Now, for mastering EQ, we want to be somewhat subtle with this. We don't want to do huge boosts and huge cuts on the master, because we have to imagine if we're clicking a node here, then we have to imagine clicking that node across every single one of these EQs. So in my loudest sustained portion, I'm just gonna use my ears, use my eyes to see kind of what I like to change. A little bit there. Maybe dip that down, maybe add a little boost here. Now, I should have said before I started that we want to make sure when we're doing our mix, we want to make sure that we leave enough headroom. So I'm bringing each of these up so that we leave enough headroom in our mix so that when we add the mastering chain, it could use up that headroom appropriately. All right, so in this case, I usually try to leave around 5 dB or so of headroom. And so even without the EQ here, I'm at -6, typically around 4 to 6, just depending on the type of cue and depending on the loudness that I need to be reaching. So that is at 4.5 dB. Just kind of A/B this. Yeah, a little bit of lift here. All right, so I'm dealing with this, and this isn't necessarily an EQ tutorial, but yeah, just a little bit. And I try to stay between 1.5 to 2 dB. I tend not to go any more or less than 1 or 2 dB. All right, so here is the real secret sauce of mastering, though, and that is using the limiter. And this, in Logic, it is the adaptive limiter, which is Logic's mastering limiter. Okay, and what the limiter it does is it's a compressor. And when we use a limiter, like say on a snare track, what we're looking to really do there is to kind of squash down some of the transients so that we don't peak a mic, or that we can kind of smooth out a performance. But in the mastering chain, that's not how we're using limiter. We're not using the limiter to get below necessarily a threshold. What we want to do is squash upper transients and then boost the gain so that those lower transients kind of fill up the frequency range a little bit more. It kind of fills up the sound, and that's where the perceived loudness, and that's where the real fullness of your mix is going to come from. All right, so I am going to add a meter here. I'm just going to put on a loudness meter using LUFS. Okay, so we have like momentary and integrated. I totally forget what the S means. Integrated. Yeah, I should look that up. But momentary, that's basically kind of instant. This is a little bit further, and this is integrated, so over time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I've got my headroom properly set at around between 4 and 6 dB. I'm going to keep these at unity gains, otherwise my meter is going to be off. I'm going to set my ceiling let's set my ceiling around -1. That's going to give us a -2 here. Actually, let's do it not quite that much. I usually go anywhere between -0.2 and -1, but here let's set it right in the middle. Let's kind of put it right at 0.5. I'm just going to click these guys across the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the gain until I reach my my desired loudness. And the loudness is dictated by the library or by your publisher, or just kind of how you want to go. My loudness I've seen anywhere between, at the very, very highest, especially for like a sports cue like this, is going to be, up to -10, even -8, and which is crazy loud. But for us, I'm going to shoot for around -15 LUFS. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this gain. Let's go ahead and start the cue. Here in the loudest sustained portion. Let's click that guy again. Now let's turn off the limiter. And turn on the limiter. Yeah, you can see that just by adding a limiter on your mastering chain, it really helps to fill up that sound. And it's not just loudness. Granted, loudness and volume does get louder, but loudness gets louder. The volume definitely gets louder, but it's a much fuller sound. And I say that if you don't have any plugins on your mastering chain except for an EQ and a limiter, then you're doing okay. Now, professionally, I use Ozone for the majority of my mastering, but sometimes that can be kind of overwhelming, and I'm here to tell you that all you really need is an EQ and an adaptive limiter, or any limiter. Logix is the adaptive limiter. Set your loudness, increase the gain on your limiter until you reach your peak loudness that you are looking to get using either LUFS or RMS, and you are well on your way to having a good, solid mastering chain that doesn't have to be overly complicated. Like I said, there's a lot more to mastering than just these two plugins, but this is a great way to get started, and I hope it works out for you. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, or if you think this is complete garbage, then let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, why don't you consider subscribing, maybe hit that notification bell when I post new videos of either quick tips or cue breakdowns of my music tracks. Thanks so much for watching.